Russia's so-called fifth-generation fighter jet was supposed to be the crown jewel of its military aviation. Instead, it has turned into one of the most embarrassing failures in modern military history. The Su-57, promoted by Moscow as a rival to America's F-22 Raptor and F-35 Lightning II, has been plagued with problems since its very first flight. From broken promises to catastrophic delays, from technical disasters to a lack of buyers, the Su-57 has become the perfect symbol of Russia's declining power. And worse, it now risks losing the very allies it hoped would bankroll its defense industry. So how did Russia's stealth fighter of the future crash before even taking off? And why does this failure matter not just for Moscow, but for the balance of power in the 21st century? Let's dive in. When the Su-57 program was first announced, it was hyped as a bold step into the future. The Kremlin declared that this fighter would match and even surpass the capabilities of Western aircraft. It would be stealthy, fast, lethal, and cheap enough to export to Russia's allies. Russian media parroted the line that this was proof of Moscow's technological genius, a signal that the country could keep up with NATO's best. But here's what they don't tell you. From day one, the Su-57 was a project built on smoke and mirrors. The jet was rushed into development, with Sukhoi and the Russian government desperate to show that they could compete with America. Except, unlike the United States, Russia lacked the massive industrial base, funding, and decades of cutting-edge aerospace experience to actually deliver. The result? A jet that exists more on paper and in propaganda than in reality. Let's start with the basics. To call something a fifth-generation fighter, it needs certain features: stealth design, advanced avionics, high maneuverability, and cutting-edge engines. The F-22 and F-35 both check those boxes. The Su-57? Not so much. Its engines are outdated, its radar signature is far larger than advertised, and the electronics inside are more reminiscent of 1990s tech than of anything futuristic. And that's just the beginning. The Su-57's development has been riddled with catastrophic problems, prototypes have crashed, test flights have been suspended, promised deadlines have been missed again and again. Production has been so slow that Russia has only managed to deliver a handful of planes, and even those are not considered combat-ready. For a country claiming to be a global military power, it's humiliating. Now you might be wondering, why doesn't Russia just pour more money into fixing it? Well, because it doesn't have the money. Between international sanctions, the costs of the war in Ukraine, and the overall weakness of its economy, Moscow is stretched thin. Unlike the United States, which can afford massive defense budgets, Russia has to choose carefully where it spends. And the Su-57 has simply failed to justify the investment. And here's where it gets even worse for Russia. The country didn't just plan to use the Su-57 for its own air force, it hoped to sell it abroad. Export sales were supposed to fund the program, making the fighter affordable. Moscow banked on allies like India and China to purchase dozens, maybe even hundreds of jets. But neither country seems interested anymore. India, once considered the key partner in the program, backed out after years of frustration. New Delhi complained that the Su-57 was overpriced, underperforming and nowhere near what had been promised. For India, which dreams of building its own advanced jets, buying into a broken Russian design was simply not worth it. Instead, it is pouring resources into its own advanced medium combat aircraft project, aiming for a first flight by 2029. China, too, has walked away. Why buy an unreliable Russian fighter when you're already producing your own? Beijing unveiled the J-35A in late 2024, a sleek, fifth-generation jet that reflects China's growing aerospace ambitions. For Beijing, the Su-57 is irrelevant, a relic of a country stuck in the past, trying desperately to compete but failing miserably. Think about what this means. Russia's two biggest customers for advanced weapons, countries that used to rely heavily on Moscow, are now building their own. The Su-57, instead of cementing Russia's role as a global arms supplier, has exposed its weakness. It is no longer a leader but a follower, scrambling to keep up with nations it once saw as junior partners. And let's not forget the symbolic aspect. For decades, Russia's military industry was its pride, the one sector where it could stand toe-to-toe with the West. Tanks, missiles, aircraft, these were supposed to be proof that Moscow was still a superpower. But the Su-57 tells a different story, one of overreach, decline, and broken promises. Now let's look at the bigger picture. This failure doesn't just damage Russia's prestige, it has real strategic consequences. In a world where advanced air power can decide wars, Russia's inability to field a credible fifth-generation fighter leaves it dangerously exposed. While the US and its allies operate hundreds of stealth fighters, Russia has a handful of prototypes. In any future conflict, that gap could prove disastrous. And here's another layer to the story. Russia's defense industry is not just struggling with planes. Across the board, its military hardware is showing cracks. In Ukraine, we've seen outdated tanks rolling onto the battlefield, shortages of precision weapons, and a reliance on drones imported from Iran. The myth of Russia as a high-tech military power is collapsing before our eyes. But there's still more. Because this isn't just about military power, it's about trust. If you are a country considering buying Russian weapons, what does the Su-57 tell you? It tells you that Moscow makes big promises it can't deliver. It tells you that when things go wrong, Russia won't fix them, because it can't afford to. It tells you that you're better off turning to the US, Europe, or even China for your defense needs. That loss of trust may be the single most damaging consequence of the Su-57 saga. Once your reputation is gone, it's almost impossible to get it back. And as if that weren't enough, Russia now faces betrayal from an unexpected corner. Hungary, one of the very few European Union members that stood by Moscow during the war in Ukraine, has suddenly turned its back. And the reason? A single phone call from US President Donald Trump. Think about that. With just one call, Washington was able to flip one of Russia's last friends in Europe. That's how weak Moscow's position has become. It cannot even count on loyalty from leaders it thought were in its pocket. So let's pull all of this together. The Su-57 was supposed to be a triumph. Instead, it's a disaster. A plane that was obsolete before it ever entered service, rejected by allies, mocked by rivals, and crippled by Russia's economic and technological decline. It is a symbol of a country that wants desperately to project power but can no longer back up its claims. And when you connect this with the wider picture, the failures in Ukraine, the loss of trust from allies, the economic strain, and the diplomatic isolation, you begin to see the reality. Russia is not rising, it is falling, and the Su-57 is just the latest proof. So, the next time you hear Russian media bragging about its super weapons, remember the Su-57. Remember the promises, the delays, the failures, and the betrayals. Because in the end, this isn't just about one fighter jet, it's about the collapse of a myth. What do you think? Is the Su-57 simply a failed project, or is it the clearest sign yet that Russia's military power is crumbling for good? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth looks at the hidden truths behind today's global conflicts, because trust me, this is just the beginning.